Hey guys, and thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of Beyond the Veil, where we cover case files, unsolved mysteries, internet oddities, and anything else that might make your skin crawl. This channel's been a dream of mine to make for a long time, and I'm so excited to finally be making it a reality. So if you like content like this, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications so you know as soon as a new video is posted. Tonight we're going to be talking about one of Australia's most gruesome murders, which is the murder of John Price. On February 29th of the year 2000, Katherine Knight viciously murdered, skinned, and cooked her husband with the intention of feeding his remains to his surviving children. Now there's a lot to unpack here, so let's go ahead and get started. Katherine Mary Knight was born just a half hour after her twin sister Joy on October 24th, 1955. Growing up, Katherine was described as a quiet, well-behaved girl who had a tendency to go into pretty intense fits of rage without a moment's notice. By the time that Katherine was 15, she left school and started her first job in a clothing factory. She stayed at this job for about a year until a new position opened up at the slaughterhouse, which was actually one of her dream jobs. Her father Ken worked at the abattoir as well, and it's something that she had always wanted to do. Katherine started at the shop by cutting offal, which is essentially all of the organs of an animal, and she ended up being really good at it. Knight was quickly promoted to animal boning, and with that, she received her very own set of butcher's knives. These knives probably meant more to her than anything else in the world, and she treated them as an extension of herself, going so far as to hang the knives above her bed at night. When she was asked about this habit, she said she liked to keep them nearby, just in case she needed them. Yikes. Overall, Katherine was a force to be reckoned with. She was one of the boys, going out to bars after work and fighting pretty much anyone that would give her the chance. It was during this time that she became close with her coworker David Kellett. David was a heavy drinker and would occasionally get into fights at the bar, where Katherine would back him up without fail. About a year after the two met, the pair married in 1974. Katherine and David's relationship quickly became toxic, starting on the night of their wedding when she attempted to strangle David because she felt that they hadn't had enough sex on their wedding night. Katherine frequently had violent outbursts, and David urged his family and friends to stay out of her way when she was angry, in fear that she would kill them. Despite her abusive nature, David and Katherine continued their marriage, and shortly after, she fell pregnant with her first child, Melissa. By the time Melissa was born, David became more and more fed up with the constant abuse and moved away to Queensland, leaving her for another woman. Spoiler alert, this didn't sit well with Katherine, and let's just say her reaction was a bit over the top. The day after David left, Katherine took Melissa on a walk down the main street and was violently swinging her stroller from side to side. It's unclear if this was just for show or if she was actually attempting to cause harm to her new baby. Either way, this event led to her being admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital, where she was treated for postpartum depression and was sent home after a few weeks. The next day after she returned home, she went out with Melissa again, who's now about 2 months old, this time leaving her stroller in the middle of the railroad tracks. She then broke into someone's backyard, stole an axe, and proceeded to go into town, threatening to kill several people nearby. Luckily, a passerby close to the railroad tracks was able to save Melissa before the train came by, minutes before its passing. Knight was detained by the police, but instead of being arrested, she was, again, taken back to St. Elmo's Hospital, where she was able to check herself out the same day. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. The next day, Katherine went to her neighbor's house, claiming that her child had fallen ill and needed to be taken to the hospital. The family agreed and followed Katherine back to her home. When the family's teenage daughter went to try and help get Melissa from the home, Knight pulled out a knife and began chasing her, slicing her in the face. Katherine then took the entire family hostage, explaining that they needed to drive her to David's mother's house. I guess her plan was simple. Katherine wanted to kill David's mother to elicit a response from him and send a message. Thankfully, on the way to David's unsuspecting mother, the family in the car convinced her that they needed to stop at a nearby gas station because their boy had asthma and needed to get out of the car. Katherine agreed, and when the boy left, he went inside and notified the police of the situation. Katherine became irate as the cops arrived, and after a long struggle between herself, the gas station attendant, and 2 police officers, Katherine was sent this time to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital for mental evaluation. Now, I think it's fair to say at this point, most people would want to take out a restraining order against the woman that tried to harm you and your family, but not David. When the police informed David of the events that had taken place, he decided the best thing to do would be to leave his new girlfriend and move back to Aberdeen with his mother so they could provide Katherine the care that she needed. On August 9, 1976, Katherine Knight was released into the custody of David's mother, Florence, and the 3 of them moved to Woodridge, where they could all start fresh. Katherine acquired a new abattoir job, and David made a living driving trucks. Things seemed to be going well for the couple, and in 1979, Katherine became pregnant with her second daughter, Natasha. One night during the pregnancy, Kelly came home late from the bar to find his wife was livid. She'd already burned all of his clothes and shoes in the bathtub and went on to hit him in the head with a frying pan. This was all for coming home late one night. The outlash scared the hell out of Kellett, and he made an escape to the neighbor's house before collapsing. At the hospital, David was treated for a fractured skull, and police attempted to pursue charges on Katherine, but she convinced David she would be on her best behavior, and he decided to drop the charges. And just like that, things seemed to be back on track after this. Katherine gave birth to Natasha Marie on March 6, 1980. Over the next 4 years, Katherine's anxiety over David's truck driving job grew more and more, and she became convinced that he had to be cheating on her while on the road. Eventually, it became too much, and in 1984, Katherine left David, moving back to her hometown of Aberdeen. This trailing anxiety and fear of abandonment continued to cause trouble in future relationships for Katherine. In 1986, she met a new man by the name of David Saunders. After a few months, they started living together, and Knight would throw him out on multiple occasions because she would be jealous of nothing, and then beg him to return soon after once she realized her mistake. In one instance, Katherine slit the throat of Saunders' 2-month-old puppy, telling him that it was an example of what would happen to him if he ever had an affair. In 1988, Katherine fell pregnant yet again and gave birth to her 3rd daughter, Sarah. The newborn motivated Saunders to put a deposit down on a house, which Katherine ultimately kept and paid off a year later when she received a large sum from workers' comp after injuring her back. Katherine spent a good deal of time decorating the house just the way she wanted it, in dead animals. The house was covered floor to ceiling in hides, horns, antlers, and skulls, and amongst the decor was a stuffed peacock and a baby deer. Other items proudly displayed were rusted animal traps, motorcycle jackets, rakes, pitchforks, and a crop and saddle. Katherine also kept an extensive video collection with predominantly movies depicting horror and death. I'm curious to know what her favorite horror movie is. Tell me in the comments below what movies you think might be in her collection. In 1990, Saunders took leave from work and went into hiding away from Katherine. Knight tried on multiple occasions to find him, but no one would give up his location. After several months, Saunders did eventually return. However, he found that Knight had told the police she was afraid of him, and they granted her a restraining order against him. In that same year, Katherine fell pregnant to her 4th child, a son, by a former co-worker from the abattoir, John Chillingworth. Their relationship followed the same patterns of abuse, and after 3 years, she left John for a man that she had been having an affair with pretty much their entire relationship, John Price. When Knight and Price met, he already had 3 children from a previous marriage that ended in 1988. His youngest daughter stayed with her mother, while the 2 older children lived with him. Price knew from the get-go that Katherine had a history of violent outbursts, but despite this, she moved into the Price home in 1995. Overall, things went well for Katherine and John. They had their arguments, and Knight still had her moments, but Price's children liked her, and he was making good money at his job, and it seemed like everything was going in the right direction. That was until 1998, when John's refusal to marry Katherine became a huge problem between them. At the time, John just wasn't looking for a true commitment and was really just in the relationship for the sex. At one point, Katherine found John's will and found that he was leaving everything to his ex-wife and kids and nothing to her. Katherine was hurt by the refusal and, in response, sent some videotapes to John's boss of expired medical kits that were in their home that John had taken from his workplace. In light of these tapes, John was fired from the position that he had held for over 17 years, which was devastating to him. That night, John kicked Katherine out of his home and vowed he wanted nothing more to do with her. But I guess Katherine had a magic touch in keeping men around, and a few months after this, John reached out to Katherine to rekindle their relationship. He didn't 100% trust her yet, and definitely didn't want her moving back in, but he wanted to continue seeing her. This didn't go over well with John's friends, and most of them refused to have anything to do with him while he was with her. Their relationship continued on for another year or two in much the same manner that it had in the past, fighting here and there, good times in between, until February of the year 2000, when Katherine assaulted John by stabbing him in the chest during an argument. This was the last straw for him. Price kicked her out of the house, and on February 29th, he stopped by the courthouse on his way to work to take out a restraining order against her. Later that day at work, Price told his coworkers that if he did not come to work the next day, it would be because Katherine had killed him. They pleaded and pleaded with him not to go home, but he was worried that she would end up harming his children if he didn't. When he got home that evening, no one was home. He found out that Katherine had sent his children over to a friend's house for the night. Price started to relax and went to a neighbor's until around 11 p.m. that evening, when he got back home to go to bed. Now, rewinding back to earlier in the day, Katherine spent her time buying herself some nice new black lingerie and then spent some time videotaping all of her children while making some strange comments that have since been interpreted as some sort of will. Now, I haven't been able to find any copies of this video or any transcripts, so I'm not sure exactly what was said. That's just the interpretation of police investigators after the fact. After Price went to sleep that night, Katherine went to his house and sat in the living room to watch TV for a few minutes before getting into the shower. After getting out of the shower, she went to Price's bedroom where the couple had sex before Price fell back asleep. At around 6 a.m. the next morning, Price's neighbor noticed that his car was still in the driveway. This was highly unusual for him, as he was normally the type of guy that, no matter how much he had to drink the night before, he was always one of the first ones at work the next day. By the time the late morning came around, John's employer had sent another employee to his home to check and see what was wrong. He never missed work and he was never late, so it was extremely weird for him to just not show up out of the blue. When his coworker arrived to his house, he met with the neighbor, and the two tried knocking on Price's bedroom window, but no one answered, and that's when they noticed the blood on the front porch. The two called the police, who arrived at 8 a.m. that Sunday morning. The police broke down the back door and discovered John Price's body and Katherine unconscious from taking an overdose of sleeping pills. Peter Muscio was the first officer onto the premises after the discovery of John's body. His account is as follows. Looking through this doorway into the lounge room, I could see a headless and skinless human body. I walked east along the hallway and looked into the entry foyer and saw an extreme amount of blood pooled on the floor. There was also a large amount of blood smearing over the eastern wall of the entry. As mentioned earlier, I saw what appeared to be a human skin or pelt hanging from the top architrave of the door, separating the dining room and the lounge room. On closer examination, I could distinguish black curly hair at the top, a nose, and a part of a mouth and ear. About halfway down the pelt, I could see a clump of short black curly hair consistent with pubic hair. I could not recognize any other particular features as it continued to the floor. The edges of the pelt were incised, indicating to me that it had been removed with a sharp instrument. There were also a number of distinct stab wounds to the pelt, about a meter down from the top. The pelt was attached to the architrave by a stainless steel meat hook. The hook was pierced through the top of the head area of the pelt and then hooked over the architrave on the lounge room side of the door. The skin appeared to vary in thickness from approximately 1 to 4 centimeters. According to forensics, Katherine Knight stabbed John Price in his sleep. He woke up and tried to turn on a light before attempting to escape while Knight chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but either stumbled backwards or was dragged back into the hallway where he eventually died. Price's autopsy shows that he had been stabbed at least 37 times in both the front and back of his body, with many of the wounds hitting vital organs. Hours after bleeding to death, Knight skinned the body and hung the skin from a meat hook on the door to the lounge room. After the skinning, Knight decapitated him and cooked parts of his body, serving them with baked potato and vegetables in 2 place settings at the table, one for each of his children. They had their names written on a note next to each plate. A third meal was cooked, but was then thrown out into the backyard for unknown reasons. Price's head was found in a pot on the stove with vegetables, still warm. When Katherine regained consciousness in the hospital, she claimed to have no memory of the crimes committed on the night of February 29th. A week later, on March 6th, Katherine Knight was charged with the murder of John Price during a special bedside sitting in the Maitland District Hospital Psychiatric Wing. It was later discovered that after she had murdered Price, Katherine left and drove to Aberdeen to withdraw $1,000 from his bank account from an automatic ATM before returning to the scene to finish what she had started. Katherine's trial began in October of 2001, where she pled guilty to manslaughter. According to Knight's psychiatrist, she was deemed sane when the crimes were committed. During her psychiatric care, Knight was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is a serious mental illness that causes problems managing your emotions. The disorder can be brought on by a myriad of trauma or genetic makeup, but is likely the best explanation for Knight's wild mood swings and insane fits of rage. On November 8th, Katherine Knight was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She has since appealed this sentence. To this day, Katherine maintains the statement that she has no memory of the horrible events that took place at the Price house that night. Experts believe that Katherine did try to eat a portion of John's body, and upon realizing what she had just done, threw the plate out into the back and then blocked out all memories of it. Knight's account of the evening includes the two having sex, then she remembers Price left the bed to go to the bathroom, and she watched him come back into the room. After that, she simply drifted to sleep. So what are your thoughts on this case? Was Katherine Knight a victim to her own predisposition of rage? Or do you think that Price's death was calculated and premeditated by an angry girlfriend? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Once again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming on this journey with me beyond the veil.